John Henry Clayton returns to the town of Fowler after many years away. Upon arriving at his old family home, he reunites with his stern father, Reverend William Clayton, who greets him coldly and informs him that his mother has passed away. The Reverend makes it clear that he never forgave his son for abandoning the family and becoming a gunslinger. When he notices that John is unarmed, he questions whether John has truly given up violence. John simply replies that he has left that life behind. Later, he silently visits his mother's grave. Sometime afterward, John and his father head into town to buy supplies. Few people recognize him, but the store owner, Mr. Parsons, remembers him as the man who went off to war. The Reverend then sends John to the saloon to fetch cider. There, when John mentions he is the Reverend's son, he draws the attention of Frank Tillman, a local outlaw. Frank mocks him for being unarmed and boasts about having killed 4 men, but John doesn't even recognize his name. David Turner steps in and urges John to walk away from the outlaws. Later, when they cross paths again, David praises John for once defeating Big from Westerfield, but John dismisses any talk of glory. He wants no trouble. The Reverend explains that powerful businessman James McCarty has been hiring dangerous men to pressure farmers into selling their land. He suspects that John's return might be connected to this conflict, but John denies it. The next day, John is seen chopping trees in one of the family's fields, an old wish of his mother's that was never fulfilled. That evening, the Reverend invites him to attend church, hoping his son will regain his faith and leave violence behind for good. But John refuses. On Sunday, while the Reverend leads the service, John continues working in the fields. Afterward, the Reverend joins a town meeting where many, in the absence of a sheriff, argue for hiring gunslingers to defend themselves. The Reverend firmly opposes the idea. He explains that he has already asked for help from the federal marshal, but the townsfolk doubt anyone will come. Poor and forgotten, they claim the law has never been on their side. Later that afternoon, John receives a visit from Mary Alice, his former love. Now married to Tom, and with a son of her own, she confesses that she waited for John for many years until finally losing hope. Meanwhile, Frank and his gang prepare to intimidate Daniel Peterson into selling his land. John witnesses the confrontation and calmly intervenes, asking to take Peterson home. When Frank challenges him, wanting to know what he will do, John replies simply, "Nothing." Frank allows it, and John escorts Peterson away with the help of other townsfolk. That night during dinner, John is visibly shaken. For the first time, he opens up about his time in the war and how he lost his faith after watching so many good men die. The Reverend, steadfast in his beliefs, accuses him of choosing that path and going to war only to kill. The next morning, Frank, Davy, and the gang show up at Peterson's farm. Armed with a shotgun, Peterson refuses to sell his land, but David urges him to back down, reminding him of his wife and children. Peterson hesitates, and at that moment Clay, one of Frank's henchmen, fires without thinking, killing the farmer. He then mocks Davy, saying he only talks big but never kills. Davy quickly draws his gun and shoots Clay dead with a single bullet. The others don't dare to move. After Peterson's funeral, the townsfolk consider offering John $200 to protect them, but Reverend William rejects the idea, speaking on his son's behalf and insisting he is no longer a violent man. Meanwhile, David meets with James McCarty to discuss what happened. McCarty shows no concern. On the contrary, he says Peterson's death has already had an effect, as 3 families have decided to sell their land. He praises Frank's brutality, but insists on keeping David close in case John decides to get involved. Back at the farm, John continues clearing the fields and ends up in another argument with his father. In anger, he accuses the Reverend of wishing that it had been him who died instead of his brother William. The Reverend denies this, saying he never thought that way. Elsewhere in town, Frank and his men attempt to intimidate Mr. Shandwick. Frank and his gang are caught in an ambush set by the townsfolk. One outlaw is killed, and Frank, wounded, flees with the survivors. Suspicious that one of his own men leaked information, Frank executes one of them on the spot as an example. Later, John visits Mary Alice. They reminisce about the past, including the day she gave him a red ribbon, telling him to return it if he still loved her. John quietly tells her she did the right thing by moving on and leaves in silence. Unbeknownst to them, Tom witnesses the encounter from a distance. That night, Tom questions Mary Alice about her feelings for John. She reassures him, saying she loves him and has no regrets about the choices she made. Soon after, we see that John has secretly kept the red ribbon hidden among his belongings. Not long after, McCarty scolds Frank for his excessive violence, fearing it will provoke the townsfolk into fighting back. The next day, Frank coldly murders Mr. Shandwick. Left with no choice, Shandwick's widow sells the land to McCarty, but before leaving, glares at him and vows that when someone finally brings him down, she'll be there to spit on his grave. While John and his father are in town buying supplies, Frank and his gang cause trouble at the general store. Frank knocks over a drink, spilling it onto the floor in his own boot, then forces John to kneel and clean it. John obeys silently, but as he leaves, he is ambushed and brutally beaten outside by the gang. The Reverend tries to intervene but is restrained. He cries out for help, but no one dares to step forward. Mary Alice tries to run to John's aid, but Tom holds her back. She insists that John is her friend and she won't abandon him. When the beating ends, she and the Reverend take John back home. At the saloon, McCarty seizes the chaos to pressure Tom into selling his land and moving his family away. Under heavy pressure, Tom agrees. The next day, Dave visits John and advises him not to retaliate. He admits that, though they barely know each other, he feels they are alike, both men shaped by war. John calmly replies that he has no intention of causing trouble. A few days later, John appears at church, surprising his father, who is deeply moved to see him there. After the service, Mary Alice greets him warmly, but Tom intervenes, shoving John and demanding he admit that he still loves his wife. John stays silent. Realizing he was wrong, Tom steps back, recognizing the truth. With a clear conscience, he cancels the sale of his land and goes to McCarty, declaring he has changed his mind. Furious, McCarty reminds him they had a deal and threatens retaliation. Later, John enters the church alone and begins to pray. His father joins him in tears. John confesses that after the war, he wandered from place to place until arriving in Norton, Kansas. One night in a saloon, two men provoked him. He reacted, killed them both, but one of his bullets passed through a shop window and struck a boy the same age as his late brother William. John has carried the weight of that tragedy ever since. Meanwhile, McCarty and his men arrive at Mary Alice's home. Since Tom had agreed to sell, they tell her the family has just 32 hours to leave the property. Desperate, Mary Alice turns to John for help. Wanting to protect them, he urges her to accept the deal and leave, believing it's the only way to keep Tom alive. That night, Reverend William goes to McCarty himself and begs for the Watsons' safety. McCarty coldly refuses. On his way out, the Reverend is ambushed by Frank and his gang in an alley. They stab him and leave him for dead. Fortunately, townsfolk find him and rush him to the doctor in time. Later, McCarty scolds Frank for acting without orders. The next morning, John sits at his father's bedside as the Reverend recovers from the attack. Weak but resolute, the Reverend pleads with his son not to seek vengeance, fearing he will lose him as well. But John firmly replies, "This won't end until someone makes it end. And this is the only way I know." John retrieves the gun he had hidden and stops by the store for reinforcements. Mr. Parsons lends him a rare revolver, an Alamat, with 9 chambers and an integrated shotgun barrel. Armed and determined, John walks silently through the streets, watched by everyone as he heads toward McCarty's saloon. Inside, he calmly asks for little Ned. Without waiting for an answer, John draws the Alamat and kills him with a single shot. He then faces the rest of the men and warns, "Anyone who wants to live, leave now." Some back away and flee. Those who remain stand no chance. John eliminates them one by one with precision. Frank tries to escape up the stairs but is shot in the head before reaching the door. As John steps outside, he is confronted by David, John urges him to walk away, but David refuses, saying his job won't allow it. With no other choice, the two prepare for a duel. John remarks that the Alamat is heavy and puts him at a disadvantage. He asks to retrieve his Colt from inside the saloon, and David agrees. When John returns, the duel resumes. Instead of drawing, he climbs the stairs and finds McCarty trembling with a gun in hand. Nervous and slow, McCarty hesitates, long enough for John to shoot first. His body crashes through the window and falls into the street for all to see. With his employer dead, David is no longer bound by contract. He lowers his weapon and allows John to walk away in peace. John knows that what he has done will draw bounty hunters and men seeking fame. He cannot stay. His father pleads with him to remain, but John promises they will meet again before riding off into the horizon. A year later, Mary Alice passes away. John does not attend her funeral, but on her grave a faded, weathered red ribbon is found, carefully tied. After his father's death, John never returned to Fowler. The moral of the story reminds us that running from the past is never enough. To move forward, one must confront it. True peace does not come from the absence of violence, but from the courage to protect those who cannot fight. And even the most scarred hearts can still hold traces of love and redemption. That's the end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to help a poor man, like and comment with the word John. Until next time, bye-bye.